The Shepnaz Podcast begins now.
Welcome to the Shepnaz Podcast. Here at Shepherd Church, everything we do here is to connect our community in a meaningful relationship with Christ. I'm Joe, I'm your host today, and today we have a special guest with us, Pastor Ana Seward, who is in service with us this coming Sunday, August 13th. This Sunday is Biker Sunday, and she will be bringing us the message. We wanted to take this opportunity to get to know her a little better and to give you a little preview of what might be coming. So welcome to the Shepnaz Podcast, Ana.
Hey, thanks. Thank you so much for having me.
I hope all is well with you. I admire your little studio background. We have been at this podcast thing for now about 7 months and doing a daily podcast for every weekday. But we are still in the process of building kind of what our podcast studio is going to be. So we have moved from room to room to room. So I just happen to be wherever I can be. But I'm very jealous of how nice your background looks. So where are you coming to us from?
I am in our little recording studio at Springdale Nazarene Church. We're down in Cincinnati. We've got a really phenomenal tech crew here that took this room. It used to be a counting room for, offerings, and they changed it completely and made it a studio. Nice.
Very nice. Well, we are in the midst of finding a back closet somewhere that we're doing kind of the same process too. Now, you mentioned your church. So what kind of role do you serve there at the church?
Yeah, so I serve here as an associate pastor. That is really kind of a catch-all. I usually do mostly first impressions types of things, so like welcoming folks into the church. I teach our Next Steps class, which is kind of a membership class, but also teaches them about our church and what we have to offer and how they can jump in and serve and get connected. I am in charge of our baptisms. I'm really excited. We actually have baptisms coming up this Sunday at my church, so very excited about getting all that stuff together.
Nice. So, well, let's do this. I don't know if you've ever watched Wheel of Fortune or if you're a fan, but normally Pat stands there with a little cue card and he prompts them to give like a 3-minute or 2-minute introduction of themselves. So I'm going to ask you to give the Wheel of Fortune introduction. Tell me a little bit about you, your family life, kind of your hobbies, your things that you do, things that make Pastor Ana.
Yeah, well, I am a wife and a mom. My husband, Ron, his road name is Wrench. You'll see him at Shepnaz. The two of us, we've been married for, going on 25 years now. And he actually plays a big part of my testimony, which is really cool. But we've been attending Shepnaz's Biker Sundays for several years now, at least, I think at least 7 or 8 years maybe. I've got 2 kids. They're both grown now. My son, his name is James. He serves in the Navy. He is now married, and his wife also serves in the Navy. She's deployed actually right now in Japan, so feel free to pray for her. Sure. And then my daughter, Catherine, is, she just finished her second year at Trevecca Nazarene. So I love to have fun. I love adventure. And so when bikes first came into our marriage, it was kind of, I wasn't quite so sure about that. My kids were younger. I didn't want to get hurt. But we have found that it's not only fun for us, but it is such an incredible mission field. And so we get to feel good while we're spending money on our silly habits.
There you go. A justification for that, yes. All right. And you can say it's for the kingdom. That's even better.
Exactly.
All right. So let's take a walk back a little bit since you did throw in there that your husband had something to do with you coming to Christ. Tell me a little bit about your faith journey. How was it that Christ called you into the family?
Yeah, so I grew up in a Catholic church, and when I was reaching my teenage years, I really just kind of took for granted that because I had been baptized as a baby, because somebody said I was going to heaven, that was just it. I was covered. So I started dating my husband when we were seniors in high school, and he would drag me along to his youth group once in a while at a Nazarene church. And whenever they would talk about you need to be saved, you need to be born again, any of that, that was actually very, I took it as an offense. I didn't think anything was missing. We ended up, I corrupted my husband. We ended up finding ourselves 19 years old, pregnant, and then getting married. And God used that. I really thought things had like kind of hit a brick wall, like, oh, I'm never going to achieve what I thought I could achieve now. But God redeemed us. We did get married. His mom, I know from day one, was praying me into the kingdom. Our first Easter together, she actually gave me a Bible. And again, I was like, thanks so much. And I was so offended. Like, what do you think I need this for?
Here's a subtle suggestion.
Yeah. I mean, it's true that the gospel is offensive to somebody who hasn't got it in their heart yet. But about 3 years in, we had baby number 2, couldn't afford to live where we lived anymore. So we ended up moving to Ohio, where I lost my whole support system, my family, my friends, my job, everything. And it was just us. And in that moment, I said, I want to go to church. And at the time I would have said, I have no idea why. And now in retrospect, I mean, that was just prevenient grace chasing after me. And I wanted to go there, not because I was after Jesus, not because I thought my life needed to change, but because the people there were nice to me. And it was actually a church that's on your church district. We lived up in Columbus at the time. So we were just there all the time where the people were nice. I went to a mom's Bible study where we were sitting on the floor of the church nursery, letting babies crawl all over the place. And they were looking for a Bible verse and said, okay, everybody look up such and such. And I faked it because I didn't know which way to turn those Bible pages. And then my Bible fell open to a page where my personal sin that I hadn't told anybody about was right there in bold print on the page. And I was just struck by that, and I couldn't help but read it. And in that moment, like, I could have been alone in the room. As I was reading that, the Lord showed me for the very first time that he saw me, that he cared about me, and that he cared what I did. And while I was being called out for my sin, I didn't feel like I was being condemned. I felt like I was being restored. And it was just the greatest moment. And my heart was changed in that moment. I didn't tell anybody about it, so I didn't know that I could say I had been born again. All those words that were so offensive to me, I had no idea had applied in that very moment. But I have been chasing after him ever since.
That's a wonderful story. And it's amazing how when the Lord convicts us, it's different than when other Christians try to convict us.
Yeah.
When the Lord convicts us, when it's the Spirit, he's lifting us up to a higher plane. And he's saying, I've got better for you, my child. And what a wonderful story that he just pursued you like that. So you became a believer then. Now, how did that transform into you feeling a call to go into ministry?
Well, from that day forward, I could not get enough of the Bible. I started doing like 2 and 3 Bible studies at a time, guided studies. I found myself volunteering to teach in the preschool department at our church, and where other people, like, you know, I was playing church really well, and I didn't like to tell anybody that I didn't know anything. But teaching in preschool, you're learning while you're teaching those kids. And so I was learning all those stories that so many Christians have, you know, grown up with. I was learning them as an adult at a preschool, you know, super easy to understand level. And I just fell more and more and more in love. We ended up having a children's pastor move on to another ministry. And so there was a vacancy, and I said, well, I can organize this stuff. Didn't think I was called to ministry. And other people saw gifts in me before I saw them and were kind of encouraging me into that. And at one point they said, well, we want you to go to this children's pastors conference. And I was like, but I'm not a children's pastor. I'm like, yeah, go anyway. You can learn something. And when I got there, I realized, oh, I am doing this. I didn't know that I could. And that call just got stronger and stronger. When I approached ordination, I stopped I actually stepped out of ministry for a hot minute and said, God, I keep hearing all these other male preachers saying that you called them to preach. I was like, I know you called me specifically to go get the education, but did you call me to preach? Because I don't want to take that if it's not for me. And so I sat in a church service almost immediately after praying that prayer. And the preacher that morning was a guest preacher, never had met me. And he's walking down the center aisle of the church saying, everybody has been called to something. What are you called to? What are you called to? What are you called to? And I just started feeling that deep in my spirit. You are called to preach. And it was almost comical. Like God saying, how many times do you need me to tell you?
Wonderful. And, you know, I hope when people are listening to this that maybe they'll go back and replay some certain things, because even as you were talking, there's a lot there to unpack. And one of the things that I was hearing you say is that there were fellow believers around you that were looking for your growth. Mm-hmm. And they were pulling potential out of you that you didn't even know that you had. That they were the ones that were identifying some gifts and helping you to see gifts that God had given you that maybe you hadn't recognized at that point. And what a challenge it is to us as believers to sometimes I think we get so focused on what does God have for me? What am I supposed to be doing? What am I supposed to change? How am I supposed to get better? And those are all great things. We are supposed to be about our own spiritual growth, but how about looking out to your brother and sister in Christ and saying, I see something in you, and giving them that encouragement and calling them out to the next step. It's just a wonderful story of how throughout your testimony, whether it was your husband to be or your mother-in-law to be or those that you were having a Bible study with, or even that preacher that finally said, what are you called to? And to see that we can be that encouragement to those around us to help bring them up to a higher call, Well, let's take a quick break. And when we get back, we're going to get a little bit more into what your current ministry is and kind of how you got involved in biker ministry of all things. And just stick with us. We'll be right back.
This coming Sunday is Biker Sunday at Shepherd. Guest speaker Pastor Ana Seward will bring the message, and there'll be a biker blessing. Services are at 9 a.m. and 10:45 a.m. After the second service, bikers will ride to Utica to enjoy some ice cream at Ye Olde Mill. Find more details about all upcoming events at shepnaz.org/calendar.
All right, well, welcome back, and we've been talking with Pastor Ana Seward, and she's going to be speaking with us on Biker Sunday, and we were getting to know her a little bit and her call to ministry, her walk of faith, and also some of the ministry that she's involved in. She told me a lot of things in the first part that she does as a pastor, but I guess I'll just kind of summarize it. It sounds like you're kind of like a next steps pastor. Is that fair to say? And but that's what you do at the church. That's your 9 to 5. So what are these other kind of ministry? I know that you have other ministry initiatives that you're involved in. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so biker ministry is a huge part of my life, and for me and my husband both together, it's really kind of awesome that we can share that. It started out, I told you, I started in children's ministry. So while I was back preaching to the little ones, my husband was sitting in grown-up church, and he was doodling. Like, what are you doing? And so I looked at what he had done, and he said, no, wait. It was holy doodling. he had sketched a cross, and on one side of it, like a cruiser type of bike, and on the other side, a speedy bike. And he said, I feel like God wants me to do some motorcycle ministry. I'm like, okay, well, then you're off the hook for coloring in church. Mm-hmm. But so we started pursuing it a little bit, and we had kind of like a little internal group at our church, a very small version of what you guys have there with Full Armor. And then we found out about Full Armor. We came up there and we were visiting and just fell in love with your team, first of all. But we had so much fun showing up to Biker Sundays. And at the time, my kids were still little, so I would follow in the car. But we were all about getting to the ice cream at the end, so it didn't matter.
Yes.
Actually, Bob Stevenson and David Middendorf played a big role in growing us into biker ministry. They mentored my husband, helped him kind of figure out what he wanted to do. And that's when he figured out, he enjoyed what we were doing with other believers and just, out for fun once in a while, but he really wanted to reach the biker community who wouldn't walk in the doors of church. And so fast forward a couple of years of us just kind of fumbling, trying to figure out how, we found out that this church where we are now, Springdale Nazarene, decided they wanted to start a biker church. And to do that, we were also going to bring in the Priesthood Motorcycle Ministry, which is a 3-piece patch-wearing group. And that probably means nothing if you're not a biker, but in the biker world, it gives us credibility. And so we were just like all in right away, said, let us be a part of that. And so we've been doing this for about 4 years. And our primary target, like anybody on 2 wheels or 3 wheels, but our target is really those folks who would call themselves 1%ers, the ones who pride themselves in having gone as far from the narrow road as you can get, and just going to where they are and just letting them know we love them. And it leads to some really great holy conversations. We have found, if you ask somebody in that place, can I pray for you? They almost never will say no, and it opens doors.
Wow. And so you guys are kind of on a mission for specifically the lost sheep, that one. Wonderful. So, do you have like weekly meetings? How does your ministry, like what's the nuts and bolts of that?
Yeah, so we've actually found that having this patched motorcycle ministry along with the biker church work together really well. The motorcycle ministry itself, we meet once a month for like a sit down actual meeting, go, Robert's Rules of Orders, and plan our calendar. But we're out there as often as we can be. So far since we've started this, there hasn't been a full month that our bikes have been parked, which is kind of crazy, I know, but so we're out there anytime there's an event. So usually our weekends when the weather's nice are spent out at random biker events that are really fun, but also, always with that mind toward who needs to hear Jesus today.
Wonderful.
And the biker church does meet every week. And so that gives us a chance to say, when we found somebody out there, like, hey, come back and join us here. And it's a way to test out church where it doesn't look like a Sunday morning, everybody's best dressed. It's just a bunch of us in biker gear hanging out and worshiping.
That would probably be foreign to a lot of churches. Not so much around here. We're pretty much used to seeing that on a weekly basis, actually, and that's a great thing. When you pull into our parking lot, we may be one of the few churches that has at least about 8 biker slots reserved
we love
there on the side. Well, tell me, you've actually done some things with your personal ministry as well, and you have a website and some resources. So could you tell us a little bit about that as well?
Yeah. So a couple of years back, actually right about the same time my son signed on with the Navy, I had a moment where I was feeling just absolutely, crippling anxiety over the idea that my baby is going to go away and I can't have any control or contact. And I met Jesus at the altar one morning, and he said, honey, I love him so much more than you love him, and I'm with him wherever he goes. And then Joshua 1:9 just kept popping up all over. And at the same time, I was organizing a women's conference at my church, and the theme was fearless. And then that verse kind of played into it. But what God gave me as a message was way too much for a one sermon. And so somebody said, why don't you write it? And I did. So I wrote a Bible study on the book of Joshua, called Seizing God's Promises Fearlessly. And then as soon as that was done, people kept asking, okay, what's next? And so now I've just about a year ago put out my second Bible study that follows the people of Israel through the eras of Judges and Kings. And so that's been a labor of love, taking those books that are kind of hard to read sometimes and lining up where the kings line up with the prophets and what God was doing in the big picture. And I've tried to make it bite-sized and palatable.
Nice. And we're going to put it in the show notes, but if you could tell everybody your website.
It's IleanaSeward.com. Ileana is my given name. It's Ileana. When I became an author and I went to publish my first book, I found out if I put my nickname Anna instead of my given name, my mother would have disowned me. So,
all right. So we'll be sure to put that in the notes. And then also, we have obviously we have the full Armor Bikers here, but we kind of have a bigger kind of cloud organization for the Nazarenes, correct?
Yeah.
And what is the resource there?
Yeah, so we're called Nazarene Motorcycle Fellowship. Our goal is to take care of two major things. One is to equip other churches in the U.S. specifically when they want to start biker ministries. We actually have found just through General Assembly this year, though, that there are folks in all kinds of other countries that we didn't expect would have biker ministry or need for that, but they're doing it and they want to use our resources too. So our goal is to help them to get up and running and help them be healthy and to learn a little bit easier because we've already kind of done some of the mistakes and trial and error. And then the other big project we have, you guys I know are very familiar with this at Shepnaz, is the Rusty Bellamy Bikes for Missions project. And I think you guys are maybe one of, I think you're the top contributor to that. So I maybe don't need to tell you a whole lot about it, but it's an important ministry putting bikes in the mission field where pastors can spend less time walking miles and miles between villages that they pastor and instead get there quickly on a bike and do what God called them to do.
Yeah, we definitely have a heart for that here, and to see how bikes can be directly used in ministry to get the gospel from village to village. It's just a wonderful thing. We're going to wrap it up. I just want to make sure I gave you the opportunity. If there's anything else you wanted to hit before we leave for today, we're very much looking forward to having you on Sunday to speak. Is there anything that you wanted to hit on?
Just to say that I'm so excited to get up there every time we visit. It's usually just once a year, but we so enjoy it, and it's like a home away from home. But I will tell you this, we lived not too far from you guys. We actually lived in Gehenna and had no idea you were there. And so I would only say this, we wish we found it before we moved away down here to Cincinnati. So I'm going to tell all your neighbors and friends who you're afraid to invite to church, invite them to church. You don't want them to move away and then find out there was this great place they could have been.
Amen. Amen. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, and we really look forward to seeing you. We welcome your questions or comments by emailing podcast@shepnaz.org. We hope that you will like and subscribe to the podcast and share us with your family and friends. You can find out more about Shepherd Church at our website at shepnaz.org. Under the Engage tab, you'll find links to replay our worship services, replay sermons, find upcoming events, and much more. Also, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Thank you for listening. God bless, and have a great day. This podcast is a production of the Shepherd Church of the Nazarene, Gehenna, Ohio. Email to podcast@shepnaz.org and let us know what you think.